So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new Media and American League Baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. There's the joy of seeing your children grow and mature, and then there's the simultaneous frustration of witnessing your parents get older at the same time. Kelly Corrigan has dealt with this time, which she calls the middle place. I know from personal experience that it's a handful, but it's overwhelming if you've been in the even darker, more complicated place that Corrigan found herself in. Breast cancer for herself, late-stage cancer for her dad. Now, she writes about all this and more with humility, humor, and grace in the book, The Middle Place. Kelly, welcome to Mr. Media.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right.
All right, so I got to ask you, if you were in the middle place, where does that put the rock and where does that put the hard place?
Yeah, you're there. You get it. One thing I will say is that for me, I was still really relishing my role as a child, so it hadn't switched over from, I'm not yet in the position where I'm taking care of my parents. So I think, maybe 10 years ago or something, there was this idea of the sandwich generation where you were caring for your children and then turning around and caring for your parents. But my middle place is a better place than that. It's where I'm caring for my children and my parents are still ready and able to care for me in a pinch. And that's what we discovered when I got sick. My parents came immediately to California many times over, which is shocking for them because they don't, they're not quick to pull out the credit card, and they don't usually fly without all their frequent flyer miles matching up with their latest $25 off coupon. But they came and went 5 times in 5 months. And, I don't know how we would have handled all that chemotherapy without them. And then right on the heels of me finishing my 7th round of chemo, my father was diagnosed. And I thought, oh, my God, this is adulthood. This is what's coming. It was just, I hadn't internalized the fact of mortality yet. It hadn't sunk in yet that, of course, someday, no matter what happens to me and no matter what doctor calls me with what diagnosis, I will have to figure it out on my own. I will not be able to find them in the world.
Mm-hmm. And, I think that the thing that I always wonder about when I come upon a book like yours is how does it feel to put your personal life so much on display out there and tell everybody so many details?
It's funny. I've read a lot of memoirs, obviously. I've read Augustin Burroughs and Mary Karr and Eat, Pray, Love and Tobias Wolff and that sort of stuff. And I find in general that I've put a lot less out there than they have. It's not a particularly, for me anyway, I don't feel that exposed. I don't feel like I revealed anything that kind of embarrassing or humiliating for my family in any way. Whereas like a Running with Scissors type memoir, or even Mary Karr's beautiful memoir, Liars Club, or Frank McCourt's memoir, Angel's Ashes. Mm-hmm. There's some really, really hard stuff in there in terms of people's bad behavior, whereas mine is more, pretty decent behavior, but more really trying circumstances.
Well, you certainly, you paint a picture of some wonderful, loving people, and it's very colorful. You retell a lot of stories and a lot of anecdotes of things that happen in lives. But still, it's just, some people are very comfortable telling stories about themselves, others aren't. And then some people find, I think this may characterize what you've done, is some people find a way to tell their story, but with some humor and some other things. You feel like you're getting to know the person, but you're not finding out, it's not the Twitterification of, finding out what you had for lunch and, what your last bowel movement was. It doesn't go that far,
Yeah, it's not TMI, for sure.
No.
I really try to control myself, and I think that I'll nonfiction writers need to do this, is to decide, what is this book really about? And in my case, the underlying question was, what does it mean to be an adult? When can we say we are a grown-up? And so every story had to contribute to that answer. Mm. And that saved me, I think, from getting into sort of these indulgent stories that are now so prevalent on blogs and Facebook and Twitter. That's past a high hurdle. It had to be thematically relevant.
Were any of your family members or friends uncomfortable with the idea of the book and the subsequent publication of the book?
No, not really. I mean, I think that before my parents and brothers read it, I think they may have had some low-level anxiety, like, wow, what's this going to read like, and what's this going to do to us, and are people going to start knocking on my front door? And but I think once they read the pages, which was well in advance of publication, I mean, they read the pages before we even sold the book. And so they knew what was coming for, almost 2 years before the book came out. And I wouldn't have published it without their blessing. I just wouldn't have. It's not worth it to me.
Did you, you mentioned right up front that, some names and some details were changed. Were there some things that people asked you to change or alter because they weren't comfortable?
Like, for instance, I tell a story which I think is really thematically relevant to the idea of what it is to be a grown-up and what it is to be a child. I tell a story about this girl who in 6th grade really tortured the hell out of me. And, everybody has this story of being picked on, and this was mine. But the reason I told the story is because at the very, 20 years down the road, I once asked my mother what the hardest time in her life was, and she said that 6th grade was pretty hard. And I said, wow, I had a really hard 6th grade too. And she said, not my 6th grade, Kelly, your 6th grade. And I said, why? And she said, you'll see. When your kid's in pain and you can't help them, it's hell. And so that story was really important because it really speaks to what it is to love your kid and how painful it is to watch them be hurt in any way, and how you have to constantly be reminded in this awful way that you cannot protect the people you love from everything there is to be protected from. But in order to get there, to that point, I had to tell the story of this girl being really mean to me, and obviously there's no need for me to use her real name. So when I said I changed some names and details, it was stuff like that, where it's just there's no need for me to spell out exactly who that was to make the point that I was trying to make.
So for you it was 6th grade. See, for me I would say it was the 7th grade, and I would say for my daughter who's in 7th grade now, I would definitely say 7th grade was the trying year. But that's interesting. Yeah.
I have 2 little girls who are in elementary school, and I'm just dreading middle school already.
It's been the worst. It's been
so
awful.
Tough. So tough.
Oh my God. Well, there is a great video clip on Amazon.com, and it's probably in a few other places, that kind of captures what the middle place is about, I think. And so for people who may be listening to us and wondering what the hell we're talking about,
yeah, sure.
I want to play the audio from that. So, if you want to have a sip of coffee or something, this is about 2 minutes. So bear with us, but I think folks, you'll find this very interesting, give you a better sense of what this book, The Middle Place by Kelly Corrigan, is all about.
The thing you need to know about me is that I'm George Corrigan's daughter. He loves a cold beer and noon mass and this fedora he calls his Indiana Jones hat. He thinks nothing of going to the corner store in his pajamas and an overcoat, and he calls his bed a fart sack. He's on his 4th set of teeth, his 3rd round of cancer, and his 900th lacrosse game. And within minutes of meeting him, you will feel smarter and funnier than you have in years. And then there's my mom. She puts cracked ice in her Chardonnay, thinks $20 is about right for a prom dress, and orders the salmon. She believes in Barry Goldwater, the Catholic Church, regifting, shoulder pads, and showing up. their job is to keep me from harm. I know this because I'm a parent now, too. I know what it is to want to safeguard your children. It starts with the first prenatal vitamin, and it never ends. Swim lessons, fire drills, CPR, and still, the child you've been so careful to protect might call you and say, "You better sit down. Something's happened." And that's what this whole thing is about, calling home instinctively. Even when you have all the documents that prove you're an adult, a marriage license, 2 birth certificates, 7 years of tax returns, but there you are, clutching the phone and thanking God that you are still someone's daughter.
That's very nice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
If
now, what else? Go ahead, please.
If you go on YouTube and look at it, or on my site, you'll see all the pictures that go with it. There's all these old family photos.
You mean the world is not simply audio? There's pictures?
No, Bob. Seriously, it's only audio. I'm sorry.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what kind of crazy talk that was. I've had too much talk.
Of course, there's kellycorrigan.com. People want to check that out. What else can we tell people about the book? What else would you like them to know without, giving away too much?
What was interesting for me when I was writing it is that there is what initially started out as this desire to provide some comic relief to the heavier chapters. Mm-hmm. Actually became a really interesting point of comparison in the book. So I was looking for funny stories to tell from growing up, and I found that, for instance, when I was 10, my brother brought home a boa constrictor from the pet shop as a pet to live in our house, and it was just totally horrifying for me. And I was locked myself in the room until my father came home to quote-unquote save me. And when I was lining up the chapters and sort of considering different sequences, I thought, oh, right, this should just go right before the chapter where my father comes out to Oakland to escort me to my first chemotherapy. It's like more or less the same thing. It's just this anxiety over an unknown beast and just feeling safer having your dad in the house. And then there were other cases where, like I would tell the story of losing my hair to chemotherapy and, kind of living bald and how vain and odd it felt. And then I found that I was wanting to tell the story of putting my hair up in Princess Leia buns for my first prom, and how that wasn't really that different, all that vanity, just different, different circumstances, same emotion.
How did you, what am I trying to say? When was your talent for storytelling first recognized? Because, like, these things that you're remembering, I mean, everybody has, like 100 memories a day that they could access, but not everybody can really retell them very well. Well,
I come from, like, a storytelling people, my tribe. So the Corrigans, for instance, have Christmas usually in Baltimore at my Aunt Mary's house, which is, like as big as the studio I'm sitting in right now. And in the middle of the room, they put a chair after dinner, and you have to jump up on the chair and tell a joke. And oftentimes the jokes that really go over big are the ones where there are accents, Irish accents, Scottish accents. So I spent a lot of time watching people work a crowd and watching people craft a story and watching people nail the comic timing. And so I felt like this was me trying to pull off a good Corrigan joke. And then, the other thing is I'm a journal writer. So I have journals going back to when I was 12. I have milk crates full of these embarrassing journals with love poetry and some really bad stuff. And So, I like to write. I mean, I like to write as just a kind of a daily exercise. And then I would look back in these journals and see, for instance, that I was really into Noah Drake on General Hospital, who was played by Rick Springfield, who ended up releasing Jesse's Girl.
Yep.
And then that would take me somewhere else, and I couldn't quite remember. And I would go on Wikipedia and look up Rick Springfield and get this page of information that would jog all sorts of memories loose. So, the combination of those milk crates of journals and the Internet took me to a lot of, it really reminded me of a lot of stuff that I would have forgotten.
I can relate to that, especially with both parents. When my daughter was small, we used to, I'd put her to bed by reading a story to her or a page out of a book. Maybe you could get by with a poem from, not a poem, but a little Dr. Seuss. But of course, eventually she gets older, and you can't get by that easily anymore. And she would start asking to hear a story.
Yeah.
And you try to remember the stories that you were told, and then pretty soon you run out of those in about a week. And what I would do is I would tell her some true story, and I found that was really good. I kind of miss those days with her because, it was good practice, to try to come up with a story a night based on something you had done and tell it colorfully. So. Well,
what's interesting about that, as a side note, is that I wrote this newspaper column once about self-esteem in kids, and there is this research that shows this super high correlation between kids with excellent self-esteem seem to know and be able to retell a large amount of family stories, not only about themselves, but their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles. And they sort of hypothesize that that's due to the fact that they feel this large tribe around them, and they have this sense of security in the world because they know where they come from and they know the people that belong to them. So, my husband and I are also always trying to do the same thing, which is tell real stories about, their great-grandfather back in Arkansas at the ice plant and, Greenie when his tooth flew out in the backyard and they couldn't find it, or, whatever the case may be. But yeah, stories, stories make the world go round. If there's anything that's persisted over all time and all culture, it's stories.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the chemo. Anything good come of being on the chemo for you?
I got rid of my cancer.
Okay, well, I guess I was skipping over the obvious.
Chemo? Yeah, no, never to be glossed over. You can't gloss over that. I had a 7-centimeter tumor. It's like as long as a credit card, and it had tentacles. And after 7 rounds of chemo, it was down to a centimeter, just like a little pearl. So that was a real good thing about chemo. The other thing is that it takes a really long time to get your chemo. And coming out of my house where I had 2 kids in diapers, and, that's a real backbreaking period in parenthood, to sit in a chair where there are nurses that are getting you cranberry juice and warm blankets and tilting you back in your chair for 7 hours, that's pretty heavenly. So if you can dissociate with the actual reason you're there and just take it for what it is, which is 7 hours of somebody taking care of your every need, and nobody asking you for anything, there is an upside. And it just slows you down. All kinds of things fall right off your to-do list. You say no more easily. You ask less of yourself. You spend more time in conversation with good people that you love. I spent a ton of face time with my parents. My parents spent a lot of time around my kids, which gave them a lot of confidence. As grandparents, I think some grandparents who don't live close by can be kind of hesitant around their grandkids. But my parents didn't have that luxury for long, and they were picking them up and telling them what to eat and telling them when to go to bed and, just really active, playing a really active role with them. And I think it's changed the trajectory of their relationship, considering that they live 3,000 miles apart. They're really close. So there was a lot of upside to that fall, a lot.
Well, there was something else that you talk about. It's all about calling home, and I know you don't mean that quite literally, but I was thinking about that. I actually spoke to my mother about this about a week ago, about how when I was a kid that she would call her parents, who lived in the same town, every night after dinner and talk to them and tell them something about her day, and then put one of the kids on, and one of the three kids would have to come on and talk about their day, and it's different, but the connection is still the same. You find different ways to stay connected if you choose to be connected. It's a
really important point. I mean, I think a lot of people are tempted to say, no, I got it. Don't worry about us. We're fine. And people call and say, please, what can I do? And they say, oh, nothing. Just calling is enough. And, maybe it is, but the fact is people want to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
It's like core to our humanity to be useful, to be productive. And it's a lot more satisfying to make a family dinner who is dealing with cancer than it is to go get your drapes dry cleaned, or finish up the laundry. I mean, there's a lot of mundane stuff that you just have to do in the course of a day, but it's a pretty elevating thing to be a part of somebody's crisis and to be useful to them in a time of need. It's, I don't know. I can't think of something better than that.
Mm. Well, before we wrap up in a minute or two, I wanted to ask you what you want to tell people about the Circus of Cancer site.
Oh, yeah. So circusofcancer.org is a really simple site with a very specific mission, which is to teach you how to love somebody through cancer treatment. Because I believe that it's as valuable for the patient as it is for the donor, so to speak, I want everybody to be less tongue-tied and less kind of paralyzed with fear of saying the wrong thing. So, the next time somebody who's going through it, one of the teachers at school or a neighbor down the street or a colleague, I want people to feel comfortable doing something. And I don't think you have to go over and go face-to-face and have some 2-hour heart-to-heart. I think there's a lot of different ways to participate at a lot of different levels, and all of that kind of adds up to, a blanket for that patient, something to keep them warm throughout their treatment. And so circusofcancer.org has lists of things that you can do, big and small, during each of the stages of cancer treatment, chemo, radiation, surgery, around recurrence anxiety, around diagnosis, etc. And then it has a bunch of essays and about 100 photographs of somebody going through cancer, just so that people can get more comfortable with what their friend is actually going through. What does the infusion center look like? What does the radiation table look like? The more exposure, it's been proven time and again, the more you're exposed to something, the more comfortable you are with it.
All right. And so this book is out. It's The Middle Place. And what's next? Will there be another book? Are you working on something else?
I'm working on a book called Lift, L-I-F-T, and that'll come out next April, and it'll be sort of a smaller book. And I'm also working on a screenplay, a comedy called Saving Fairyland with my friend Betsy Barnes, and we're just trying to see if we can make a movie.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, folks, listen, you can order Kelly Corrigan's book, The Middle Place, at great bookstores everywhere or on mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. You may also want to visit her website, www.kellycorrigan.com. That's solid, Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, Corrigan.com. Or, of course, the Circus of Cancer website we were just discussing, which is www.circusofcancer.org. circusofcancersolid.org. And Kelly, are you on Twitter or Facebook? Can people find you in any of those places?
I'm on Facebook.
So look for her there. And Kelly, thanks so much for joining us on Mr. Media today. It's fascinating.
Thanks, Bob.
All right. Well, good luck to you.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And folks, for more interviews with nonfiction authors, you can surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with, and believe it or not, I have to say this, the skinny bitches, because that's what they call themselves. Legs McNeil, Mike Edison, David Wild, David Michaelis, Larry Ratso Sloman, David Andelman, my cousin, A.J. Jacobs, and many more. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites. Whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, Pointer Online, Digital Journal, Podcast Pickle, Vox, Folio, Mediafly, Podfeed.net, Blueberry, Zencast, or Odeo. And subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman.com. It's ANDELMAN. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing a piece of your day with Mr. Media. Talk again real soon.